Welcome to a new episode of This Week in Indie, where the fun never ends. In the last 2 episodes, we've discussed writing the first chapter and the middle of the story. Now it's time to talk about writing the end. From standalones to series, everything comes to an end at some point. How do they differ? And what is consistent with each finale? We'll sit down at the round table with a group of panelists to break it down. Then CL Cannon with the Indie Connection comes along to give us more to add to our TBR with books similar to The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. At the last part of our show, we'll race against the clock for the 5-minute drill. Who will win this season's prize? So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, hit the like button, and get ready for a fun show. Here's your host for this week's episode, Madilynn Dale. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and thank you for joining us. We have a great group of people to discuss our topic today, and I'm really excited about it because there's so many versions, cats and cameras, so many different versions of how people create the ending. I'm kind of curious to see what all goes into the various endings of all of our work. But without further ado, let me bring everybody in and let them introduce themselves. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Such a beautiful group of authors this morning, guys. I'm excited to see your lovely faces. So we're going to go around and we'll start with Mr. Green up here and let everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm David Green. I write epic and urban fantasy. I've just finished a series this year, so it wasn't just the end of a book, it was the end of a series as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with everyone else about endings.
Yeah.
I'm S.M. Hillman professionally, just call me Sean. You can find links to my recently, actually it's not that recent, I guess, a few months ago, published collection of short stories, The Language of Skeptics. And yeah, sticking the ending is a topic I've talked about before, and I'm eager to talk about it today.
I'm Jessica Nettles, the author of The Children of Menlo Park. You can find a sample of my book at www.jessicanettles.author.com. The ending of my novel was really interesting to write, and I'm interested to talk about endings in general today.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Karina Kantas here. I am a prolific author with 14 published books. I write everything from young adult to adult, fantasy, science fiction. If you like something really gritty, go over to Dirty Streets Press for some dark romance.
Ooh.
Hey everyone, I'm Juliette Rose. I'm a cross-genre author. I currently have 9 published books, working on my 10th. And I love this subject because I never know what my ending's going to be when I start writing.
Yes, dude, I am the same way when it comes to writing. But before we jump into more on the topic, I want to show who else hanging out with us in the chat. We got Karina breaking the fourth wall. Anita's hovering. Oh, and I can't forget, if you guys are watching on Facebook, send a star to let our host and producers know how much you appreciate what they do here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. We got Jessica breaking the fourth wall. Tiffany Vegas here. And then we've got a lot of fourth wall breakers this morning, guys. So, but yeah, so like Juliette said, some of us, we kind of don't know how the ending is going to turn out. And even if we plan, sometimes that changes. How often does your ending change from what you've planned it to be?
Okay, well, I'm a pantser, so I don't plan at all. I have no idea what's going to happen for the ending. I know how I'm starting. I know where I want to go. And until I get there, even the author myself don't know what's going to happen. So it's a mystery.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to agree. I go into books pretty much. I'm a pantser, so I go in pretty much just with like general ideas of little things, maybe a few scenes I definitely know I want to throw in there, but everything else kind of just comes to me as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a general idea of what my ending was going to be like for children. And then I got there and just sort of threw everything at it, and then had to go back and pull back a whole lot. But yeah, I had just a general wide idea of where it was going to be and what should happen, and that was about it.
A lot of times I will actually write the beginning and then I will write the end while at the same time. So I then work inwards from a story or book. So, but inevitably, and I think this is probably pretty common, but inevitably, that and I will go once I hit the middle, I will go back and work on the beginning and work on the end in particular because it's inevitably has changed because of what has progressed in between.
Ooh.
Yeah, I kind of know where my characters are going to kind of finish up with where they're going to finish, like if what's going to happen to them, and so I kind of have a general kind of idea of what the ending of a book or a series will be when I start it, but it's not like forensically plotted or anything like that. So there is like little changes, like there might be little things along the way where a certain character kind of sticks around for a bit longer or doesn't, or you can have like a bit of a change of heart on something, or just organic changes in when you're writing a book or anything. But generally there's like for the series that I just finished, like about halfway through, I have this thing whenever I'm getting on a plane, I send my manuscript to my beta reader and I say, if this plane crashes, you can finish this book.
Charming.
That's like a terrifying / like, okay, kind of what else can you do?
They're used to it now because I fly quite a lot, so it's like it's only going from Ireland to England as well. It's nothing fancy really, like sometimes to like Holland or Spain or Portugal, so it's not like big long flights or anything. But so they're quite used to it. But one time I was very, very kind of anxious about it, I think, so I wrote out the endings for all the characters and sent it to them, and they didn't change, and that was like sort of like somewhere in the middle of the series. So so yeah, it was pretty accurate. But yeah, that's some of the method behind the madness.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's kind of hard to like get back on the train of thought there. I'm like, oh, because I get excited about flying too.
I'm not nervous about flying, but I'm just aware of the fact that if the plane decides to crash, there's nothing I can do about it. So
well, that's your ending in the universe, right?
There you go.
Oh my gosh. So we have these endings that change and they don't change. What are some things you have to kind of keep in mind while you're writing the story towards that ending or in discovering that ending? What are some things you have to keep in mind while you're working? Like tying up loose ends, for example.
It depends. I mean, it depends, I think, what kind of book it is as well. Like, so if it's a series, like there's a lot of more things that you kind of have to consider. So if it's like, first, second, third book in a continuous series and it's not the final book, there's different considerations than if it is the final book in a series. So you kind of want to, so say it's like the third book in a 5-book series or what have you. You kind of want it to kind of be satisfying in its own right. You're telling a complete story in that book to kind of finish certain arcs that are inside the book, but you also want to kind of leave enough thread that's going on for the rest of the series as well. So it's kind of like it's it's kind of like you're spinning plates, you know, and you're letting some plates drop, or you're taking some plates off the stick because they're done with. But there's a certain amount, and then there's that kind of thing where it's like, you know, sometimes some people will put in a cliffhanger, or some people will put a hook, which, you know, cliffhangers and hooks are very, very different. And sometimes people misunderstand one for the other, but they're sometimes they're necessary. But when it's the final book in a series, then it's one of those things, and it depends on what kind of writer you are, because I'm the kind of person as a writer and a reader where I don't want everything answered. Like I want there to be some unanswered questions at the end of a series. Like, you know, it's fun to imagine, and it's fun to kind of, like, you know, have that kind of space where there is some ambiguity with certain things, but then you need to kind of have that balance, and that's where there's enough things where it is still satisfying, and you are kind of, like, you know, again, telling a complete story, not just for that book, but for a whole series as well. So it does get quite tricky, and there's quite the deeper you go into it. Because I did a 4-book series, or 5-book, because there was a prequel as well, and I was kind of thinking, God, this is a lot to remember and a lot to kind of wrap up with this amount of books. So the people that do kind of, you know, 10 books in a series, or like, you know, 15, some people do, and whatever. It's like, it's a lot to kind of keep going. So yeah, there's a lot. It's quite head spinning.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, like, don't rush the ending. And I think, you know, as a reader, I've read books where they were so good, and I'm really into the book, and then all of a sudden the ending is just like, blah, blah, blah. And like, I was like, no, like they didn't match the pace of the end of the book to the rest of the book, and then they kind of rushed an idea, or they didn't really think through the ending. So like, what would have been, like, say, a 5-star read for me, all of a sudden became a 3-star read for me, because it just, the ending really matters. And I think people forget that when they're writing, is that this is just as important as every other part of the book, if not more so, because that's what you're leaving the reader on. That's the note you're leaving them on. So hopefully they'll either pick up another book in series or pick up another one of your books. So I think really just giving the ending the work and credit that it needs.
That's a good point. Who wants to go next, guy?
Okay. All right. I'll go. So the ending is where I kill off my main characters. Yes. No, seriously, I do, and in quite a few books. I like to, you've got as we said last week with the middle, you've got the main conflict happening in the middle. So the ending, you need to have the resolution. What happened after that conflict? What was the conclusion? If it's an end of a book, if it is a solo one read book, then you need to wrap it up in a red ribbon, basically. They will not be happy if it's supposed to be a standalone and you leave unanswered questions, and you'll get reviews telling you that. So everything needs to be nicely wrapped up for the reader to feel, after that great big crescendo in the middle, finally they can breathe nice and gently. If it's a continuation, leave them on the biggest cliffhanger you can, but make sure you don't leave them 10 years to write, to read the next book. Make sure the next book ready to be published, or you've already finished the first draft if you're going to leave them on a big hit cliffhanger, because readers hate waiting to read the next book.
Karina, I feel like you're calling yourself out there.
What? No.
I think, well, everything said so far is fantastic. And I do think, though, that there's a difference when you're an indie author or self-published versus someone who's getting by traditionally published. Well, I mean, traditionally published. I think whether or not a book, like if I on a lark write a fantasy novel, I really need to decide if that's going to be a series or not, and then that book will end that book will end differently, even if I'm just hinting that there's going to be more books, right? Versus because it's not really like if I put out a novel and 100 people read it, that's not a benchmark for me to say, well, And not enough people read it. I won't continue this. For me, 100 people reading my book would be fantastic right now. But for the traditionally published author, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? So I do think there's some difference in between them in how you end a book. In general, I do like to most of my stories end on a kind of hint about the future. I think is probably not they end definitively, but it's obvious that there's more to it in most cases. But that again, if I never go back to that short story or novel, that's going to be for the reader to enjoy, right? That's for them to sort of hopefully soak in and say, oh, this is cool. And now they can imagine what might happen next. So.
Yeah.
I always feel like the story has more to it. Even if it's a standalone book, because the world has more to it. I always see the bigger picture. So I'm one of those weird readers that I'm not necessarily reading to expect another book, and I'm not going to hound an author. Well, no, I lie. I might hound an author for a next book, but I just go in understanding the world is larger than that one story. So even if I come to the end, there's always that part of me that's going, well, what happens next?
Ooh.
And I kind of like for my stories to be, even my short stories, to be that way too. So even if you read like some of my short stories, you'll notice that my characters tend to have this sense that something else is going to happen next. I have a character in my story in Lonely Hollows driving off towards Atlanta, towards a new life, and you have to wonder what's going to happen to this guy once he gets to Atlanta, and he's still a werewolf. What's going to happen then?
Yeah, I'm the same. I'd be the same as that, and I like that as a reader as well, because I think
Yes.
it's nice to feel like this world that you've been kind of reading a story in, that it's not the only story that's happened in that world. It's like, because otherwise it's kind of, it feels a little bit kind of false, a little bit, and a little bit flimsy, that there's nothing else that's happened or nothing else that's going to happen. So I kind of like it when people, like authors, do kind of go back to the same worlds and tell other stories in them, not necessarily with the same characters or anything like that, but just like, get to go back to that world. But I think there's different expectations as well with for genre. Like, the ending of a book is different. There's different expectations depending on the genre, basically. Like, there's certain for epic fantasy, for example, like, and this isn't an indie series by any stretch of the imagination, but something like Wheel of Time, which is like 14 books plus a prequel. Even at the end, there's the main questions of the series are answered, but then there is specific things that are put in there where it's like, we're not giving you an answer to this, to just let people speculate, because that's what fans of epic fantasy like to do. They like to, because there's usually quite a big wait in between books, and they like to speculate on stuff. Whereas, like, with sort of like, romance or maybe horror and or other things like that what are more standalone in nature, the readers expect there to be completely, as Karina said, completely wrapped up in a red bow, because that is their expectation. So you have to, when you're kind of writing an ending and whatever genre that you're playing, then you have to kind of really kind of pay attention to what the reader expectations are and those things, because you could write an absolutely fantastic final book or an absolutely fantastic book, but those last few pages or chapters might leave a bitter taste in the mouth, which is always a problem with endings, because especially with a series that people are invested in, they will kind of have their own kind of headcanon and their own thoughts about what's going to happen, and you're definitively answering things that they might not like your answer to the questions that you've been doing for the rest of the previous parts of the series. So there's always that kind of bit where you might not have everyone coming along for the rest of the ride, because it might be, well, that's that. But it's expectations in certain genres is really, really important when it comes to that final acts of the story.
With Broken Chains, I did wrap it up with a big red silky bow. However, people want a sequel, and I still can't think of how it's going to move on, and yet they seem to think it can move on. So that's like, oh, can it? So now I'm thinking, well, can I do it? So it was a standalone. It still is a standalone, but it could be. I don't know how. I don't know how they see that it can move on. I've got to think about getting into their mindset, the reader's mindset of how it can. But as an author, it's closed. It's finished. The story's ended. Not happily ever after, because I don't do those. But it's done. It's completed. But I would be really interested to find out how they think it could be moved on. I mean, you've read it, Madilynn, so.
And see, Jessica put up exactly what I was thinking. Isn't that how fan fiction comes about? Yes, because that was
Well,
what I was thinking. Would have them write some fan fiction.
Well, I always think of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. You know, the second Planet of the Apes movie where they just blow the planet up at the end, like, and then but there's still 3 more films afterwards. So there's always a way.
There's always a way.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think to add a satisfying ending is important, even if you do leave threads in there. And even on things I think are standalones, I'll probably leave threads in there. The threads are as much for me as for the reader, because maybe I do want to pick this back up in a year or two, and I don't necessarily have that idea. So I create a satisfying ending, but I also create those threads just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like those threads kind of help. Maybe later on, if you do, like you mentioned, want to keep going, you can just pick it back up and take it a new direction than what it was. Because like in my Phase Shifters, I leave those threads at the end of book 4, and that idea is still percolating back here. But it's not time for me to write it yet, because it's going to be shifting a generation. Not just, I mean, it's got shifters. I just, you know.
I hear you.
Right.
It's the same with Illusional Reality, with the quest. It's a duology. It was inspired by me watching Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Everyone was waiting for the 3rd book. There are threads, and there is a subnosis. No one knows this, of a 3rd book. But I have no intention of writing that 3rd book at this time, but it ends nice. Like I said, the questions are answered. People find out what's really going on. However, there are things in the ending that can say, well, what's going to happen next? Something's going on now. I've not left them on a cliffhanger, because it is a finished book. It was going to be a duology finished. However, ...
I think, like, if you don't leave threads or leave yourself a little bit of wriggle room, you're kind of relying on goodwill from the reader then, and if you do go back to it, because I always kind of think of Sherlock Holmes with like Arthur Conan Doyle was done with it, like he hated working on it, and he just wanted to do something else, so he killed Sherlock Holmes off with when he was fighting with Moriarty and they go over the waterfall. He was definitively dead, and then there was like so much pressure for him to go back and write it again. There was like from everyone, and he decided to, and because it was so definitive, it was kind of like, well, you know what, he wasn't dead. He was fine, and it's just kind of, you have to just kind of brush over it, and which he kind of did, and just hope that the readers would go along with it. And because people were so happy that there was more Sherlock Holmes stuff, people did, but you have to be careful that you kind of, sometimes it can stretch the reader's kind of goodwill or believability. And so leaving yourself little bits of wriggle room and little bits of threads, or if it's just like a really well-developed world where there could be other stories in it, is always quite beneficial, because that kind of thing where it's like, well, this person's dead, but actually they're not dead. It's so well worn now when people kind of roll their eyes at it. So it can be a little bit, it's sometimes it's wise just to kind of have that little bit of wriggle room just in case.
I think sometimes we leave threads and we don't think about it either. We don't consider it a thread, and then your reader picks up on it and goes, "Is this a thread?" And then you'll have a conversation with somebody, and they'll say, "Well, what about this thing?" And you're like, you're thinking to yourself, I didn't mean it like that. But obviously they think it's something. So, okay, maybe, I don't know. I mean, It's happened to me a couple of times that I'm like, I did not consider that. That is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never know how people are going to react to something as well. Like how. And I remember reading this an interview with the last two Bond films. There was Spectre, and then the last Daniel Craig one. And in Spectre, like, which people didn't seem to like all that much, but there's a bit where if anyone's seen it, there's a bit where Blofeld's talking to Bond, and he's like, there's a place in the brain that if you inject it, kind of like people lose their like memories and all this kind of stuff and what have you. And then he injects them and nothing happens. And he's like, oh, I must have just missed it. And then the story just continues. And then when the guy who was doing the next film was talking about it, he talked about that scene and was like, I actually, when I first sat down to see the script, I was going to go back to that point and just be like, the rest of the film was just like this fever dream because of this injection, and just start again from there, because he hated the film so much. it's just funny, just like what people will react to and what they'll kind of look at a story and go, well, actually, you know what, you went right here, but I could go left, or I could do this. And a lot of readers are like that as well. Like they'll look at things and they'll go, well, this is an opportunity, or this is an avenue that you could explore. And it's great when they do that, because it means that they're really connected with it.
Mm-hmm.
And A.O. Mingle's got a great thing that I'm gonna lead into. My books have been known to introduce questions at the end which not everyone likes, and the mortician, the twist completely changed the whole story they just read. Not all readers like ambiguous ends. Do you guys feel like that kind of ties into, like David, you mentioned earlier, a lot of high fantasy stories do that? Or can that actually be used in other genres as well? Sean, you're muted. I was like, I see your lips moving, but
no, I think that any genre can do that. I think you can effectively, well, I mean, with horror especially, you kill the thing at the end, but there's always another thing at the end. Science fiction in particular, open, I think, depending on the subgenre or the idioms of the science fiction you're dealing with, are definitely open to ambiguous endings. If your spaceship just, is on course and it can't course correct, so the main story's tied up, but they're on the ship heading away from Earth at increasing velocity, and they're just looking at each other like, what will the future hold? I don't know. The end. That is something I think that most readers will probably lay them onto and be like, oh, okay, yeah. Now we can tell the story of this ship 100 or 1,000 years from now.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties in with, like, again with the genre expectations as well. But I think with twists, I think there's two things with twists. There's ones that like twists are always going to be like abrupt for people, and that's what the whole thing is, isn't it? And they are meant to kind of be there to kind of re-examine what has gone before. But a good twist is something when you kind of go back and reread it, or you think about it, you see the breadcrumbs that are there, and it feels earned then. And I think if it's a twist that just comes out of nowhere and there's been no bedding into the thing that has been written into the story, then I think it feels kind of cheap to people, and it can be a lot of kind of readers or viewers or something will feel kind of cheated by it, because there's no evidence that this twist was coming. So I love twists. I think twist endings are great, but I also love the fact that you can kind of go back and go, actually, you know what? It was there all along, but I just didn't notice it because the writer did such a great job. And I think that's where it comes into where some people kind of reject them if it's just a poorly done twist that's just there for the sake of being there, and it wasn't present in the rest of the story. I think that's one of the things with twists that you kind of have to really kind of examine when you're doing it, and make sure it's not too obvious as well, because that's part of the fun of them.
Yeah, I've got a huge twist on Stone Cold, which is a young adult supernatural, and people have said in the reviews, oh my god, the twist, I was not expecting that. It really shocked me, and I was like, yes, done it.
Yeah,
and I think there's a difference between an ambiguous ending. I mean, it's an art form to do an ambiguous ending. You really do have to still build that into the story. Somebody should be able to get to that and then still kind of like like Dave was saying, there should almost be Easter eggs within the story that kind of lead up to that. And I've definitely seen endings where somebody, I think, was trying to be ambiguous instead of it was just confusing and made the whole story kind of like not count. So I think it's really just knowing that craft correctly.
Right. And I agree with that. I love a good ambiguous ending because I like to be going at the end going, but once again, it needs to be built up to, it needs to be crafted well. You look at things like 2001, A Space Odyssey, and there's a sort of ambiguous ending, and it's well crafted, and you get to the ending and you're like, wow. I mean, I walked around for like 2.5 weeks after I read that book, just kind of walking in that space, trying to figure things out. And it wasn't that it was badly done. It was that I was just blown away by it. So it can be done well. And if you can do it well, man, it's a superpower.
The book hangover inducing ending. Yes.
Absolutely.
Those are the best. But they're also frustrating because you're like, I want to read another story, but then you just like nothing.
I was so numb, I didn't care. I was like, whoa. Head trip.
Yeah. And Karina says, love a twisty twist in my books. A.L. Mingle said, that is a very good assessment. So I think he was referring to, I don't know for sure, but yeah. So we've got these endings. They're coming together. How do you fix plot holes if they come up and you realize, oh, I didn't tie this up? What did I mess up? Do you have like a method to go to, like a go-to solution for those?
Go back
Have
into
a
the
good
middle,
editor.
fix them.
Okay, say that one more time. You both said it at the same time. I was like, whoa. So,
Go on, Jess.
Have a good editor. Have somebody that reads and goes, hey, there's a plot hole. And then you go back and, go to the middle. Karina's got it. Go back and find out where that hole comes from and see if you can sew it up. And then if you can't, maybe that hole's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Magic.
Magic always. Yeah.
You try not to, you try not to let it happen, and hopefully it's something that you can kind of fix. And sometimes if it's if it's in a series or something like that, and it's something that's already been published, when you kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, I think that's happened to everyone, but you kind of get to a point where it's like, I can't actually do this because of things that I've done in the previous books. But then that's the fun part around it as well. It's kind of like, you want your rules to kind of be consistent, but you can always bend rules, or you can kind of come up with ways where the characters kind of have to kind of bend the rules in some kind of way and kind of overcome this thing that you've done before. But it's kind of one of those things. Well, I always kind of think of Joe Crompton's favorite author, J.R.R. Tolkien, which is his favorite author. He wrote The Hobbit, and in the original version of The Hobbit, Gollum just gives the ring to Bilbo as a present, but he's quite nice actually. He lets him, he leads him out of the the mines, and is like, here you go, this is it. And then he started writing Lord of the Rings, and the ring became more kind of this evil thing. He was like, this is a problem because I just have Gollum just giving him the ring basically in the Hobbit, and it's like, so he went back and rewrote parts of the Hobbit and re-released it, and then to take it a step further, he wrote a foreword for Lord of the Rings where it's like Bilbo lied about it in the original. It's like, you may have read a version of The Hobbit before where this works out quite differently, but it's because Bilbo lied about it because of the ring. So like, there's always a way of doing things, I suppose. Like, and that's like a really fun thing about unreliable narrators, which I think is a really great. I love that trope anyway in movies and in books. So there's a lot of things that at your disposal that you can kind of use if you do come across a plot hole, like.
Yeah, and Anita says magic is the duct tape of fantasy writers. So, Ale Mingle says, the book in question weaves back and forth through 2 time periods and 2 complete casts. The twist makes a second cast, which exists in a different setting. Makes sense. That's a good point. If you can't be handsome, at least you can be handy. Rules are meant to be broken. I love all of those guys. Oh my gosh. Oh, gotta love plot holes though. Like they just kind of, and it's funny how we miss those as we write. They're just like, oh snap,
And if your
How
editor
many-
doesn't find them, then the reader does, and that's big problems
Oh
then.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Then
Oh
you're
no,
like,
I left it there deliberately. It's there for a reason. Then you have to come up with a reason why it's there. So it doesn't look like you made the biggest mistake in your book.
and see, and it
Yeah.
would,
Find the plot hole. You win $10. Yeah.
yeah. And especially if you find it after, because I know I've been doing a lot of freelance stuff, and there was one author, she had the manuscript edited before she sent it out to like her beta readers and stuff. And it's like, dude, this is a really big plot hole. Like, and nobody else had flagged it. I was like, yeah, you got to fix this. So it's like,
Yeah. Well, my question is, what kind of editor was she using? Was it a copy editor or was it a developmental editor? Because there's a difference.
Yeah. She didn't specify. So, and I was not getting paid to do that, but read it. So it was like, you got to here's that. So, but let's take our little pause break because we have been talking about some amazing stuff here. Oops, let me double click. This is me and my computer fighting today, guys. But let's talk about, we've got some common books. I say they're not common exactly, but some great books that C.L. Cannon has brought to us, again, with her amazing indie connection. So make sure you guys grab your pen and pencil to write down the names of these books because you do not want to miss adding them to your never-ending TBR. So.
Hey guys, C.L. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. Today I actually don't have a print copy of the book that I want to showcase, so I'm going to let it magically appear up here for you. I am going to be telling you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which of course is a Hunger Games prequel. And even better, the movie version of this just released this week, so now is a great time to pick up indie books related to this one. The first book I have for you is called Numbers Game by Rebecca Road. In Nora, every day is a competition. On rating day, Trina and the rest of her class will receive the number that brands her for life. Shouldn't be a problem since she's a top contender with nearly perfect scores. But when her number is announced, it shocks everyone. Then she discovers that somebody wants her dead, and they're being far from subtle about it. When Trina joins a secret military contingent to raise her score quickly, she soon discovers that Nora isn't what she thought, and neither is Vance, her mysterious trainer with a haunted past and plans of his own. Can two enemies help one another in a desperate search for the truth? And if they manage to survive the deadly game of numbers, whose version of the future will win in the end? The second book I have for you is called The Union by T.H. Hernandez. After global warming and a second civil war devastated the former United States, two different societies rose from the ashes. The Union, a towering high-tech utopia hugging the perimeter of the continent, and the devastated, untamed midsection known as the Ruins. 17-year-old Evan Taylor has an easy, privileged life in the Union. What she doesn't have is any idea what to do with the rest of her life. She only knows she wants to do something meaningful, to make a difference in the lives of others. When she's kidnapped and taken into the Ruins as a pawn in a dispute involving her boyfriend Bryce, her ideal world is turned upside down. What she learns while she's in the Ruins shakes her faith in everything she's ever known, from Bryce to her family, and even the Union itself. Now Evan must choose whether to stay with Cyrus, the sexy, resourceful survivor who believes she's in the Ruins for a reason, or return to the only life she's ever known. But when she stumbles upon a dangerous plot that threatens both worlds, her decision could tear her apart. The third book I have for you is called The Amnesty Games by K.A. Riley. 17-year-old Alora is a hawker, and she's been training her whole life for this. This is the week of the annual Amnesty Games. Accompanied by her 5 fellow hawkers, Alora is about to do battle with 100 of the hopefuls, the most violent and dangerous convicts from the ward. It's 5 days of hand-to-hand combat, physical challenges, mazes, traps, and obstacle courses, all followed by a 2-day pursuit through the Netherwoods, where Allura and the Hawkers will track down any of the hopefuls who've managed to make it that far. If the hopefuls succeed, they get their freedom. If not, it's back to prison for the rest of their lives. It's been this way since the start of the new states. But what happens when buried secrets are revealed and the two sides stop playing the game by the same rules? And the last book I have for you is called The Trials of Imogene's Soul by C.L. Walters. Imogene's soul has had to work twice as hard for everything she has earned as a cadet at the Ring Academy on Cirta. An orphan of notorious parents who killed hundreds of thousands of people in a bombing against the Federation, most people hate her by name alone. Others have gone out of their way to make her life difficult. Though she's managed to acquire a handful of trusted friends over her years at the Academy, most of her peers loathe her. But she's made her mark in the top 10 of her cadet class, and she's ready to compete for what's next. As the Year 7 final trials begin, a series of tests to determine placement within the Federation, Imogen knows all her hopes are riding on her performance. But when she's framed for an offense that could not only get her expelled from the Academy, but also incarcerated, Imogen must discover who's behind the threat against her. When her greatest competition, Timaeus Cade, offers to help her solve the mystery to clear her name, Imogen must decide if she's willing to trust him. The stakes are high. Only the mysterious saboteur strikes again, justifying she needs his help, proving the stakes aren't just her future anymore, but her life. Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
I always love some of the selections she has on the Indie Connection. And like I said, like my list just keeps growing on my TBR. But to start kind of wrapping up towards the end here, what are some things you guys would say are a must to that maybe you go through like a checklist or that you make sure to cover when tying up your stories?
I mean, I think we touched on, like, honestly, the plot holes are a big thing, making sure to go back, you know, once you've done the ending, go back and reread through, make sure things sync up with the ending that you've created.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that the ending be interesting, and maybe that sounds obvious, but you can write a flawless ending that's kind of boring and predictable. You know, we've talked about twists and such already, but I think that's like the very end of the book. But if that final act, right, that whole final act has to be satisfying and it's got to pay off. So I think that you need to make sure that you're ending the right conflicts. I've read some pieces where the thing that's set up in the middle is not really what is set up at the end, and there's a disconnect between the two acts. And probably due to some of the things that we've spoken about already. So yeah, it's got to be interesting. It's got to wrap up the right stories. It's got to be a logical extension of the middle and the beginning. And I think to just really, the tone has to be the same. And I guess you can experiment with different tones and different acts. I don't think I'm good enough as a writer yet to do that. So tonally, it's got to match up with the middle and the beginning, or it just seems as if there's a disconnect there that, as a reader, it really disturbs me.
Yeah, what Julie said at the start of the show, Juliet said at the start of the show, that not to rush it. I've read books where it's obvious the deadline has approached because it was flowing nice and smooth, even with the big conflicts, whatever. And then the ending was like, and it was like, what happened? What? You know, this, as a reader, you don't want that. You know how the book is supposed to end because you're invested in it and you have an idea of how it should end. So you feel cheated when it doesn't end the way you want it, and when it's obviously been rushed because of a deadline or just boredom, just had enough of the story, just got to finish it, the end. As an author, I would never do that. I have to satisfy my readers. I have to make sure they get closure, unless of course it's a follow-up. make sure that they're satisfied. And as Sean said, make sure it flows with the rest. The tone at the end flows with the rest of the book. It can't suddenly have a different voice, because there will be a disconnect, and that won't satisfy the reader.
Yeah.
I would say make it logical too, because I've read some endings where whatever's happening at the end just isn't logical. It doesn't make sense, and there's that disconnect once again. And of course, I was going to say pacing, but Karina beat me to it. But because I have the same complaint, there's been a lot of books that I've read where the pacing comes to the end and it's just like a mess. But also, there's a logic factor. It has to make sense and go with everything else that's happened. So you can't have characters suddenly changing in a major way that doesn't add up, or making choices suddenly that, why did they make that choice? That doesn't make sense. I've seen that happen. So, think very carefully as you're wrapping things up about your characters and what are they going to do next. And if it's going to continue, make sure that if they're going to make choices that are going to lead to something in the next book, that those choices make sense as well, so that you can make that connection in the next book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's three kind of things that I kind of keep see if I've answered when I'm doing it. So there's plot and there's story, because plot and story are different, and then there's character arcs as well. And I think you can kind of tell that people that kind of focus a lot on plot, because I think that comes up with what a lot of people have said, where it doesn't make sense, or it's unsatisfying, or it feels rushed. It's because they've just focused on, well, I'm wrapping up the plot. This is the end, and this is the plot and everything. But then you have the story, which is how the plot is told and the themes of the story and everything, and they need to be answered as well. It needs to be satisfying. It needs to be consistent and tonally correct at how you've been doing it throughout the rest of the story, and then it comes with characters then as well. Those arcs have to be fulfilled and they have to be finished. And when you get into an ending, and it depends, and again, no matter what the genre is, so you might have stuff that you might have more kind of romantic fantasy with a happy ever after, but the happy ever after still needs to be earned. It can't just be doled out. It needs to feel like the characters have earned these happy ever afters. And with any other kind of genre as well, the characters needs to be a sense of, well, the characters have earned this ending. If it's a good ending or a bad ending, if it's a horror thing and everyone dies at the end or something like that, it still needs to be earned, right? And if it's epic or dark fantasy or something, and it's kind of a bittersweet ending, or there's a big kind of resolution, sometimes it needs to come with a price as well, and that needs to feel earned. So there's a lot of these kind of things that you kind of have to examine, because readers do pick up on it as well if it doesn't feel satisfying, and that's the most important thing with an ending, especially if it's like a series, is you may have given them plot answers that they may not agree with or may not like, but it can still be a satisfying ending if the rest of the things is resolved quite well. The characters have a good resolution, and the theme of what you've been doing with the book is kind of wrapped up quite well. So it's a balancing act, and it's making sure that you're doing enough attention on all those different components of the story to make it, to kind of wrap it up, because endings are tricky, and that's why people some of the best or most well-known writers like Stephen King struggle with endings, because they're very, very tricky, and you're never going to please everyone. So the best thing to do is to try and do the best job that you can as a storyteller, and kind of focus on all the areas of what makes up a story.
Yes.
Yeah, and knowing when to end. I think sometimes you read a book and you're like, you should have ended this 30 pages ago. Just keep going. So really knowing where your ending is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, such great advice in this episode, guys, about the story ending. I love it. But now it's time to shift gears and get ready for a fun bit of questions and games. Let me get the share screen stuff going real quick. Pull it up. So I'm muted. Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay. Let me get our layout changed over. Oh gosh, there we go. I was like, what is happening? Me and these layouts, guys. Oh. All right, so we're gonna race against clock, guys. Like we've got some catching up to do on some of these. Yeah, and I've got some great questions. But does anybody need like to take a drink or a swig of water or anything before we start getting these going? Because we are going to beat the clock this time. All right. Let me get it up and get it started. Here we go. The first question is, what part of your story is your favorite to write? The beginning, middle, or end?
End.
Beginning.
Beginning.
Middle.
Middle. All right. If you could learn a new language, what language would you choose?
Sign
Spanish.
language.
Gaelic.
Finnish.
Japanese.
Ooh. Everybody answered, right? Okay, cool. Okay. Name one indie book you've read this year.
Oh, jeez. Synced by Rachel Renner.
The Wild Dark.
Proposal, Victoria's County.
League of
Menlo Park.
Monsters.
Yeah, Menlo Park by Jessica.
All right. Juliet, did you answer too?
I did. I said The Wild Dark by Captain Silver.
Okay. Let's go. Everybody answered at once. So we'll go from David like across. That way I can make sure we get them all. Name one U.S. football team. And I say U.S. because I know some of you guys are not U.S.
Portland Timbers.
There you go.
What sports team? Any sports team?
U.S. Football teams.
Oh, U.S. football team. I'll say Atlanta United for our foreign friends, and Atlanta Falcons for the U.S. friends.
Okay.
Atlanta Falcons, because Atlanta.
New York Jets.
Okay.
Jets.
Cool. Okay. If you could move to a different country, where would you move?
Finland.
Wales or Finland.
Wales.
Ireland.
Switzerland.
Okay. Good choices, guys. If you could pick an animal mascot for yourself, what would you pick?
Owl.
The Tasmanian Devil.
Black cat.
Bat.
Phoenix.
Nice. All right. Here we're at 7. We're doing great. What do you set your thermostat at to sleep at night?
22. In European.
I know. I was sitting here like that. Yep, Celsius.
He's a corpse.
I'd love for it to be like 68, I think. Be my ideal.
74.
Oh gosh, Jessica. Whew.
67.
I'm a lizard at heart.
I don't have one.
Nice. Are you a Taylor Swift fan? Why or why not?
Oh my God.
I'm way too old to be a Taylor Swift fan.
You are so not, David. You're not that much older than me.
No, I just don't care for the music, but I think she's an outstanding artist for sure.
No, but she's cool.
No, not my kind of music.
Hell no.
Guys, just broke my heart, guys. Oh, 9. What is your go-to comfort food?
Pasta.
Potato chips.
Pho.
Anything potatoes. Baked potato. Fries.
Tomato
doesn't
soup.
Yes. Last question. What is one thing you want for Christmas?
Amazon vouchers.
Yeah, a new coffee machine.
Yarn.
Peace and quiet.
Being surrounded by friends.
Love it. All right, guys, we did it with a minute to spare. Woo-hoo! Yeah. Take that, other episodes. I don't know who's in this right now, but those were great answers. And seriously, none of you guys like Taylor Swift? I mean, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Just shake it off.
You're trouble, you are.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't help it. Like I'm kind of a Swiftie because like some of her music, I guess it's just my generation has like influenced a lot of my writing. So her and Selena Gomez, yeah,
Give me Iron Maiden any day. That's my influence.
Yes.
I don't know if I've ever actually heard a Taylor Swift song. To be honest, honestly, I'm not just saying that. I don't know if I have or not. I may have, but I've never heard something and gone, "Oh, that's Taylor Swift." I just don't know.
I'm gonna send you a link to a Spotify list. Okay. Karina says no. Some of her songs are really good. Come on, Karina. She's evolved from where she first started. Like
She is evolved definitely every time she comes. She started with country, pop, rock. She does everything. I give her. She's versatile. I give her that. That's all I'm giving her.
But
No,
enough
I'll
about
do my-
Taylor Swift, guys. Let's go around the table and we're gonna start reverse with Juliet and tell our listeners and viewers where they can follow you and grab copies of your work.
Sure. So you can follow me at my website, authorjulietrose.com. It has links to my books, my social media. You can contact me there. That's a great place to start.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can find all my books information and all my reviews on explosivewriter.com. And if you like that dark edge romance with lots of explicit scenes and graphic violence, then check out Dirty Streets Press.
Yes. Thank you for being on the show today, Karina.
Thank you for having me.
You can find me at jessicanettlesauthor.com. If you want to buy my books, I am on Amazon. I'm also on falstaffbooks.com where you can buy my books on Shopify.
Ooh, thank you for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you.
You can find my book at thewickedvoice.com. Their social media, I think it's all updated there. If you're a convention goer, you can find me in April at jordancon.org, where I head up sci-fi track, and then later in the year, you can find me at Multiverse, where I do the play track.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, Sean.
Wait, Jay will kill me. Also, coming up in a couple weeks, episode 2 of Zero Means You're Dead. If you like role-playing games, you will enjoy our next episode, which covers a lot of the multiverse coverage. And a week after that, I think it's a week after that, Hit the Dice, where one of our multiverse authors will be running a game for some of us. So Zero Means You're Dead and Hit the Dice on Go Indie Now. Like and subscribe, please. And thank you for having me today.
I'm really interested in that. I love TTRPG, so I'll be definitely watching that. I've completely forgotten what I was going to say because you've distracted me with it, Sean.
David?
Yeah, what's that?
Where can we find your books?
Oh, where we can find my books? Well, you can find them here. There, davidgreenwriter.com. And you can find me. I have nothing planned for the next while. Actually, I'm just going to be listening to Taylor Swift when Maddie sends me this screen. That's it. No, nothing planned. I may come over to America in the future and do some conventions in America, but we'll see.
Yes, okay. Multiverse should be on that list. Do you have any Green Room episodes coming up?
I actually don't know. That's terrible list. I don't know. Maybe. I think so. Possibly. I don't know. Maybe.
Yes. I feel that though. I'm Madilynn Dale, guys, today's host, the Chapter Goddess. You can find all of my stuff here at my website, which is also in the process of being kind of like revamped. I'm redoing my bookstore portion on it. So it's going to have a nice, new, pretty, better organized look soon. And you can also grab a copy of all these guys' books and their links in the descriptions. It'll take you to their website. Some of them, I think, take to Amazon. I just grabbed what I could. And also, like and subscribe. This channel, we've constantly got stuff going on. There's always something good, something funny, entertaining, things that'll make you laugh, dropping almost every day of the week or streaming live. I don't know for sure what all is coming up this week, but I know we've got some amazing shows. We'll be back next week with This Week in Indies, a new episode of that, hosted by Mr. Joe Compton himself. And then our year in show is coming up, where we'll be talking about this year's top books, movies, games, all indie related. So if you have no other reason to subscribe for that and add to your TBR list. I mean, come on now, guys. But once again, you found us here at Go Indie Now, and we are so glad you found us. We'll hope you stay. But until next time, guys, remember, it's always time to go indie now.